The key was under the third brick, just like the message said. Nova crouched on the front steps, her guitar case slumped beside her, one boot untied, hair sticking to her cheek from a drizzle that had turned into real rain an hour ago. She should have been annoyed, but all she felt was relief. The city was louder than she'd imagined, sharper around the edges, and she was tired, bone-deep tired, from carrying her entire life on a bus with no working air conditioning and too many strangers staring at her calloused fingers. She pressed the key into the lock. It clicked easily. The door opened without resistance. Inside, the apartment smelled like warm paper and bergamot. There was no one there. The place was dim, not dark, but lived in, like someone liked lamps better than overhead lights. There were books stacked on the floor near the windows, a mug with a pencil still in it by the couch, and a scattering of plants in different stages of health. She closed the door behind her gently. Her room, the smaller one, was off to the left, empty, clean sheets, a tiny desk, the hum of city life muffled by thick curtains. Nova dropped her bag and let herself breathe. She wasn't sure how long this sublet would last. She wasn't even supposed to be here. The residency coordinator's cousin had bailed on housing last minute, and this was the best they could do. 2 bedrooms, 1 tenant. Don't expect to talk. That's what the message said. She hadn't thought it would be literal. In the kitchen, there was a note on the fridge, taped with care. Welcome. Rules. I work nights. I'm not rude, just private. Please don't knock on my door unless something's on fire. The olive oil is mine. Don't touch it. Everything else is negotiable. Nova stared at it, at the handwriting, small, precise, written with the kind of pen you only use when you're a certain kind of person, deliberate, quiet, sharp. She opened the fridge. The olive oil was labeled. She smiled, just a little, and whispered, "Okay then." She didn't see him that night. She unpacked slowly, strumming chords under her breath, barely above a hum. She wrote lyrics at her desk and heard the faint sound of typing through the wall, steady, fast, like someone chasing thoughts before they disappeared. It didn't bother her. It reminded her of something she didn't know she'd missed, the sound of someone else's mind, close enough to touch, but not quite. When she woke up the next morning, there was a second note on the fridge, written on the back of a coffee receipt. You hum when you write. It's not annoying, just unexpected. E. Nova read the note twice before touching it. Just 4 lines scribbled on a coffee receipt. Not poetic, not personal, but it unsettled her anyway. The idea that someone on the other side of a wall had heard her humming, not just heard it, listened. She didn't know if she liked that, or if she liked it too much. She wasn't used to being heard without being watched. Back home, people listened with expectation. In class, they listened with critique. In crowds, they didn't listen at all. But this felt different, anonymous, quiet, real. That night, she waited until the apartment was dark, until the typing started again, the rhythmic tapping she'd already memorized like a metronome. She tore a page from her notebook and scribbled something in pencil. I hum because lyrics don't always show up when I ask them to. Sometimes they come slower when I'm quiet. She hesitated, then added, "You type fast. Are you chasing something?" She folded the note in thirds, wrote for E on the outside, and slid it under the door with the olive oil sticker on it, then went to bed with her headphones on, too aware of her own heartbeat. By morning, the note was gone. Later that day, a clean white index card appeared on the kitchen counter, not under her door, not hidden, just waiting. I write at night because no one expects anything from me when it's dark. And yes, always chasing, usually dialogue. Do your lyrics talk back to you? E. Nova stared at the card longer than she meant to, then took a marker from the drawer and replied directly on the back. Only the honest ones. She left it beside the coffee machine. No signature, no smiley faces, just black ink and space. It felt more like conversation than most conversations she'd had in weeks. That night, she hummed louder, not accidentally, and when the typing stopped for a full minute, she smiled. The third note was a book quote. Left beside the sugar jar, scribbled on the inside of a torn envelope. She wasn't waiting to be saved. She was just hoping someone would notice the fire. E. Nova read it while stirring her tea, her fingers tightening around the handle as something in her chest pulled taut. She didn't know the book, but she knew the feeling. She considered not replying, then grabbed her lyric journal and flipped to the margins, the ones she always filled with fragments that never made it into songs. She copied one down with deliberate pen strokes. I write like I'm trying to remember how to be heard without screaming. She left it on the edge of the sink. No greeting, no flourish, just the line, like a held-out hand. The next day, it was gone. By the end of the week, the fridge looked like a confessional. Lines torn from novels, lyrics neither of them claimed, bits of dialogue from unnamed characters. At some point, Elias started writing on small index cards only, clean and structured. Nova replied in messy script on napkins, receipts, the inside flaps of food boxes. I keep thinking about what your voice would sound like if you read me your lyrics. E. I've never read them out loud. I think they'd feel too real. You can tell the truth when no one's looking. That's the only time I do. They still hadn't seen each other. They kept to their opposite hours, her mornings, him nights. She heard the rustle of his door, the faint clink of dishes at 2 a.m., the soft, steady beat of his typing. Sometimes she hummed just to hear him stop, not in irritation, in listening. She started writing differently. Not better, just braver. More eyes, less hiding behind metaphor, more ache, less perfection. It felt like Elias was reading over her shoulder even when he wasn't, which was terrifying and kind of beautiful. That Sunday night, a new note appeared under her door, one she wasn't expecting. Typed this time, printed neatly on heavy paper. If I wrote something real, something I've never shared with anyone, would you read it? even if I didn't put my name on it? E. Nova stared at the page for a long time, then wrote back in pen directly on the bottom. Only if you want me to hear you. The envelope was under her door when she woke up. Unmarked, no initials, no message, just thick white paper folded once and sealed with a piece of tape. Nova stared at it for a long time before touching it. Part of her didn't want to know what was inside, not because she feared what it said, but because she knew once she read it, things wouldn't be the same. She peeled the tape slowly, unfolded the page, and began to read. It wasn't a scene from a novel. It wasn't even structured, just a single page, like a memory. A boy in a quiet apartment. A night too silent to sleep. He writes not to be understood, but to stop himself from disappearing. I started ghostwriting because it felt safe to speak as someone else, but now I don't remember what my voice sounds like when I'm not hiding behind someone else's name. Some nights, I wonder what it would be like to write for just one person, just once, someone who doesn't care what shelf it lands on. Someone who hears me, even when I'm quiet. No signature, no apology, just truth. Nova read it twice, then sat on the floor, cross-legged in her pajamas, the paper in her lap like something fragile, a bird that hadn't decided whether to fly or stay. She didn't cry, but she felt something sharp move behind her ribs. Not pity, recognition. That afternoon, she left a folded napkin on the kitchen counter with her reply. I don't care what name you write under. That was the first time I felt like someone wrote something with me in the room. Then, underneath that, smaller, thank you for trusting me. She signed it N for the first time. That night, she hummed softly for hours, and for the first time, the typing stopped completely. But the silence didn't feel like absence. It felt like listening. Nova didn't hum that night. Elias noticed the silence before he noticed anything else. No soft rhythm drifting through the wall, no chords on repeat, no pen tapping against the desk in time with some melody only she could hear. Just stillness. He stopped typing, waited. Nothing. It wasn't like they had rules. Not for this. Not for how they were supposed to exist near each other without meeting, or how they had slowly started to orbit the same invisible space. But her absence felt loud, not just in the wall, in his chest. He didn't sleep. Instead, he stayed up and wrote something he wasn't supposed to. Not a note, not a reply, a scene. The next morning, Nova found it tucked into her notebook on the kitchen table. 3 pages, titled simply, The Girl Behind the Music. It was fiction, barely. A character named N, who lived in a small apartment, too afraid to sing in front of anyone, but too full of melody to stay silent. A boy next door, who wrote romance for people he didn't believe in, who only began to feel real when her voice began to spill through the walls like light under a locked door. In the final scene, she stops humming. The boy knocks, but not on her door, on the wall. Just once, and she hums back. Nova read it slowly, her throat tight. At the bottom, a single line in Elias's handwriting. You don't have to hum, but I hope you know I miss it when you don't. She didn't write back immediately. Instead, she walked to the thin wall between their bedrooms, placed her palm flat against the cool surface, and began to sing. Not loud, not polished, not perfect, just her. One verse, raw and unfinished, a melody about not knowing how to ask someone to stay, but hoping they do. She stopped before the chorus and waited. The typing didn't resume, but after a few seconds, she heard a single soft sound, a knock, one beat through the wall. He said it like he'd been holding it for days. Not shouted, not whispered, just spoken, like an answer. Nova. It was late, maybe past midnight. She'd just finished brushing her teeth, about to return to her room, when she passed the narrow strip of wall that separated them, and paused, like always. She didn't mean to stay there long, just long enough to listen. But something about the night, or the song she hadn't finished, made her open her mouth and sing a single line. Not a full verse, just one sentence. I'm scared to want something I can't name yet. Then silence, but only for a second. Then came the word, Nova. From the other side of the wall, her name, spoken like a breath, like a reply. She froze. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she sat on the floor, back to the wall, bare feet curled beneath her, and listened. No typing, no movement, just breath, his faint and steady, as if he were sitting on the other side in the same position, saying her name and then waiting, like it was her turn. She whispered, Elias. The sound barely made it past her lips, but she knew he heard it. Because a moment later, he laughed just once, soft, like relief, and then, that's the first time you've ever said it. She smiled, let her head rest back against the wall. It's the first time you said mine. Was it strange? No, she said quietly. It felt like something I already knew the sound of. Neither of them moved. They stayed like that for a long time, back to back with a wall between them, saying nothing else, letting the silence settle in the space like something warm instead of distant. And when she finally stood and walked to her room, she left her door open, just a little, so the music could travel easier. She didn't expect to see him, not like that, not barefoot in the kitchen, hair a little messy, shirt wrinkled like he'd fallen asleep at his desk, and only just remembered to exist in the rest of the apartment. But that's exactly how she saw Elias for the first time. Nova had been up early, wandering to the kitchen half awake, searching for tea with her notebook still pressed to her side. She was humming, softly, lazily, without meaning to, when she rounded the corner. And there he was, back turned, pouring coffee. He paused when he heard her, not like a startled animal, just a person registering something they'd been waiting for longer than they wanted to admit. She froze. He turned. Elias looked different than she imagined, not because he didn't match the voice or the letters or the stories, but because he did. Tired eyes, thoughtful posture, one hand still faintly ink-stained, the kind of presence that didn't ask to be noticed, but couldn't be forgotten once you did. He looked at her like she wasn't surprising, like this moment had already happened in his head 100 times. She spoke first. "Hi." He smiled, slowly, like it didn't know how to arrive all at once. "Hi." They stood in silence for a beat too long. Then Nova gestured toward the kettle. "I was going to make tea." Elias stepped back. "Kitchen's yours in the morning. I just couldn't sleep." She moved past him gently, not touching, but close enough to feel it. As she reached for the mugs, he said, "You're taller than I thought." She raised an eyebrow. "And you're quieter." Most people say the opposite. I'm not most people. I know. They sat at the table across from each other, steaming mugs between them, a notebook open and untouched. No notes exchanged, no walls between them. And still, something soft held the air together. Not nerves, not awkwardness, just recognition. Like every line they'd written had been a shape of the other, now complete. She didn't ask what he was working on. He didn't ask her to sing. They didn't need to. Not yet. Just this. Tea, quiet, eye contact. The beginning of something without paper. It started as a question. They were sitting in the living room the next night, an open window letting in the breeze, a candle flickering too close to a paperback novel neither of them was reading. Elias looked up from his notebook and asked, softly, "Will you play something for me?" Nova hesitated, not because she didn't want to, but because it was different now. Speaking was one thing, seeing was another, but being heard, intentionally, fully, felt like something else entirely. Still, she nodded, got up, retrieved her guitar from the corner, and sat on the floor across from him, legs crossed, fingers already finding the chords like they'd been waiting. She didn't apologize, didn't say, "This one's not finished," or "Ignore the second verse." She just played. A quiet, aching song about missing someone you haven't met yet, about recognizing a voice before you ever know the face, about notes passed under doors and hands never held but never forgotten. She didn't look at him while she sang. She looked at the floor, at her fingers, but she felt him watching her, not just politely, but like every word mattered. When the last chord faded, she let the silence land, didn't fill it, didn't ask if he liked it, just waited. Elias spoke slowly. "That felt like you were singing something I wrote before I knew how to write it." Nova looked up. Their eyes met. Something stopped in her. "Your turn," she said. "Read me something." He hesitated, not out of fear, just wait, then nodded. He reached for his laptop, scrolled through something unseen, then paused, like choosing the version of himself he wanted her to meet. He began to read. It was a short piece, a boy and a girl who live in opposite rooms, talking through pages, building a love story made of fragments. In the final paragraph, they meet. No kiss, no declaration, just the boy reaching out to hand her the last letter, the one with nothing written on it, because they didn't need the words anymore. When he finished, Nova whispered, "Is that how you'd end it?" Elias set the laptop down. "I don't know," he said. "It depends on whether she takes the letter." Nova stood slowly, crossed the room, and sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. Then she reached over and took his hand. No words, no paper, just this. They sat like that for a long time, not speaking, not moving. Her fingers laced lightly through his thumb brushing the edge of her wrist in slow, uncertain circles. No more notes, no more walls, just skin and silence and the shared breath of something they hadn't named yet. Elias was the first to shift, just slightly, turning toward her, like he was trying to read a lyric written in her posture. Nova met his eyes, soft, curious, not pulling away. He asked, "Is this part of the song?" She tilted her head. What would the chorus be? He gave the smallest smile. You, sitting here, not letting go. Her heart was loud in her ears, but not in a panicked way, in the way you feel when a line finally falls into place after hours of chasing it, when the words you couldn't find are suddenly just there. Not perfect, just right. He leaned in, slowly, giving her space to change her mind. She didn't. Their foreheads touched first. Then the tip of his nose grazed hers. Then nothing for a moment, just hovering. Until Nova whispered, "Okay," and that was all he needed. The kiss was soft, not deep, not demanding. It tasted like paper and honey tea and nervous breath. But it felt like something opening, like the first page of something they'd both been afraid to write. When they finally pulled back, neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full of everything they'd already said and everything they would now dare to say out loud. Nova woke to music that wasn't hers. Not from her phone, not from the radio. Real music. Hesitant chords plucked on a guitar she didn't own. From the living room. From him. She sat up slowly, heart already too awake. Pulled on a sweatshirt. Didn't fix her hair. Didn't worry about what she looked like. She just followed the sound. Elias was on the floor where she'd been the night before, her guitar in his lap, still barefoot. When he saw her, he didn't stop playing, just looked up and gave her a small, sleep-creased smile. "I didn't ask," he said softly. "Hope that's okay." Nova nodded. "That's more than okay." He played another chord, paused. "I tried writing lyrics last night," he said. "I think they were awful." "Show me." "Absolutely not." She laughed, and he smiled wider. They sat across from each other again. No candles this time, no notes, no excuses, just morning light and too many unsaid things hanging in the air like lines waiting for a chorus. Nova picked up the notebook beside her, opened it, flipped past everything they'd shared so far. Blank page. She handed it to him. "I want you to write something," she said. Elias blanked. "Right now?" "Yes." "I don't..." "No names, no plot, just something true." He stared at the page, then down at the pen she offered him, and wrote, "This is the first morning I don't feel like a character in someone else's story." He looked up. Nova leaned forward and kissed him again. They didn't talk about what it meant, not yet, but they started making coffee together. They left their doors open. They played music in the kitchen and started writing in the same room. And neither of them went back to leaving notes, because now they didn't need paper to be heard. They didn't say, "Let's make something together." It just happened. One afternoon, Nova was working at the piano in the common space down the hall. Elias wandered in with his laptop and sat on the floor behind her. She sang half a verse, unfinished, simple, and paused. From behind her, he said, "That line's perfect. Don't change it." She turned. He didn't look up, just kept typing. Later, in the apartment, she asked what he'd been working on. He showed her a scene. A boy who writes stories in silence. A girl who sings in secret. They don't meet until they create something they can only finish together. Nova read it once, then again, then looked at him. "You're not hiding anymore," she said. "I don't want to," Elias replied. She handed the pages back. "Then let's finish it." Over the next 2 weeks, they built something. A short story, written in alternating voices. A song, threaded through the story's scenes, lyrics intercut with prose like dialogue. Some nights, they argued about structure. Some nights, they didn't speak at all, just passed lines back and forth, fingers brushing, eyes full. Elias started leaving his door open on purpose. Nova started writing in his room, even when he wasn't there. They wrote in silence, but not distance. And every once in a while, he'd reach over and underline a line she didn't think anyone would notice. And she'd do the same. By the time the project was finished, they had no idea who wrote what. It didn't matter. It all belonged to both of them. On the final page of the manuscript, Nova wrote a single sentence. "We only started talking because we thought we'd never have to." Elias added one more, in smaller print, "But I'm glad we did." The night of the reading, it rained. Not heavy, just enough to blur the windows, to make the city hum a little softer. Nova stood near the back of the small bookstore, the kind with mismatched chairs and string lights hanging like they were trying to remember a sky. Her guitar was slung over one shoulder. Her name was printed on the event flyer, and beside hers, finally, publicly, was his, Elias Marin. No pseudonym, no hiding. He almost didn't come. He told her so, right before they left the apartment. Nova just looked at him and said, "Then I'll sing loud enough for both of us." So he came, and now he was sitting in the second row, hands clasped, lips pressed tight, in the way he always did when his heart was louder than his thoughts. They'd agreed she would sing first, then he would read, then they would finish it, the last page, the last verse, together. She stepped up, tuned her guitar slowly, then sang. The song wasn't perfect. Her voice cracked once on the chorus. She forgot a line and smiled instead of fixing it, but it didn't matter. Because the room was listening. Because Elias was smiling. Because every note sounded like a page turning towards something real. When she finished, she didn't bow, just stepped aside. Elias stood, slowly, holding the book they'd stitched together. He didn't look at the crowd. He looked at her, and then he read. It was the final scene, the one they rewrote 3 times and still didn't feel done with. A boy, a girl, an apartment with thin walls. They stop leaving notes. They start leaving doors open. They build something with their hands, with their voices, with the quiet between them. When he closed the book, the room was still. Then came the applause. But it didn't matter. Nova was already walking toward him. He met her halfway. And this time, they didn't kiss in private. They didn't need to. They'd already told the whole room everything without ever saying it directly.